Welcome to this new lesson about chat completion parameters. So chat completion has some parameters that can affect the output, of course, other than the prompt. So for a prompt, for the same prompt, you can make calls with certain parameters or with another set of parameters, and you will get different responses. We will try these in the playground. So if we go back to OpenAI platform, then if we go to playground, here we can play with the APIs. Now, whatever we do here applies to the code and the API calls directly from our Node.js. So the first parameter, which is very important one, is the temperature. The temperature, as you can see here, default value was 1. It can be 0 or it can be 2. And the default, as I said, it is 1. So it controls the amount of the randomness or the creativity in the output. Low values close to 0 will mean that the answer will be almost deterministic. The chat completion model will give you the one single answer that most people gave for this question. So it's almost deterministic. While higher values are more random. 2 is very random, which means that if you call ChatGPT multiple times, you are going to get a very diverse set of responses. So usually when there is a deterministic behavior of your question, you set the temperature to 0. When you want the answer to your question to be creative and explore new areas, then you use a high temperature value like 2, while 1 is the default. Let me demo this. Let me put the temperature to 0. My prompt will be, what is AI? Let's say in one sentence. Okay, let me submit this. Okay, so this is the answer, which is almost deterministic, things that are connected to the AI. Let me try again. As you can see, it's almost the same. It is just rephrasing the same thing. It is not being creative. It's not trying to make things look fancy. Let's change this and put it to here. Let me send the same question again. You can see, in fact, there is rubbish here. So it was very creative. It used words that are very loosely coupled with artificial intelligence. So if you want a deterministic answer to get the same response, if you call it multiple times, use 0 or very low temperature value. If you want something to be creative, to try things that people didn't try before, then use a high temperature. Or the default is 1. It is sometimes more appropriate because it will be a balance between randomness and the creativity. So let's try to send with temperature 1. Okay, so it realized that the previous response is not coherent, and now it is giving something which is more deterministic. Okay, so that's about temperature. The next parameter we will look at is max length. Its default, as you can see, it is 256. Now you can reduce it to 1, which doesn't make sense, or raise it to 2K in the case of GPT. Now GPT allow you to have total number of tokens in a request for 1000K. Now that includes the response and the request. So that's why this is not 4000, because you need to leave some tokens for the request. So as you can see, for this model, we can change it from 1 to 2K. Okay, let me test with this. I will leave this to 5, 6 or the same. Now let me delete these. Okay, what is AI in one, let's say, paragraph? Okay, send. Okay, so that was fine, and it seems that this is less than 256. Let's reduce it to 44 and see what we will get. Okay, as you can see, it got truncated. So because we limited the maximum length of the return value to 44. So you need to balance it. If you expect a lot of tokens in the return, you can increase them, else you need to decrease it, but just don't make it very low, because that will make the output truncated. A third important parameter is called n, which is the number of return inputs. If you specify n to be 2, this is equivalent of calling the ChatCompletion model twice. Now, in each time, it will try to answer your question. It is not necessary to always return the same answer, but of course, it's about the temperature and other factors. If the temperature is low, it will be deterministic and most answers will be the same. If the temperature is high, it will be more random, and the differences will be obvious between the multiple returned inputs. Now here I don't see this in the playground, so I'll show it to you in the code. I'll go back to our API here. I will change n to, so I wanted to return 2 inputs. I will save. Also, I want to log the entire choices array, because now we will have 2, not 1. Okay, save. Let me restart. I restart this. Now I will call this. Okay, the answer is Paris. If we go back to Visual Studio Code, here you can see that the choices now is an array of 2 returned responses. And both cases, the response was Paris. The temperature was 0.5, so it's more deterministic. And there was no doubt, so in both cases it returned the same value. Okay, the next parameter is the stop sequence. You can specify a word or a character. If it appears, then the response will stop and will be truncated. This is useful in cases where you want, for example, to stop once you got an SQL statements, because most of the SQL statements end with a semicolon, so you can add a stop sequence for a semicolon to finish after receiving the SQL statement. There are other reasons why you may want to stop if you get the stop sequence. Stop sequence, you can specify 1 up to 4, so you can specify up to 4. You need to specify them as a list in this case. Let's here try it. I will come here and I will, you are an SQL developer, write me SQL statement to query all users in the user table. Now I have no stop sequences. Let me submit. As you can see, I got a complete output. Let me now add a stop sequence. I'll add just one, which is semicolon. Okay, let me send it again now with the stop sequence, the semicolon. As you can see, after the SQL statement, because there was a semicolon, then it stopped. Let me try again. Okay, again, you can see it apologized and then it stopped here because of the semicolon. So that's about the stop sequence. As I said, you can have up to 4 and the output will be truncated if any of these appear. So the last one we will cover will be the frequency penalty. The value for the frequency penalty will be from -2 to +2. The default value is 0. The higher the value, the lower the chance to repeat the same tokens in the response. So that's why it's called frequency penalty. If a word happened in the response already a couple of times, then it is less likely to happen again, because it will put penalty. It will prevent itself from repeating the same. While -2, it might be able to use the same word many times in the text. So it will be less creative if you put -2 or 0. But if you put 2, it will be more creative, because it will put a penalty on reusing the same word. Let's try it here. For example, frequency penalty here, I put it to 0. Let me change this in details. What is the capital of France? So it is answering in more details, and if you look, it will have repeated the same word multiple times. Let's change the frequency penalty. Now you can see, if you read this and this, you will see that it penalized for repeating the same word. For example, the same word Paris itself, it happened multiple times, and it happened even here in the last before one. While if you read this here, you will find that the repeat of the words was much less because we used a high frequency penalty. So these are in general the parameters that you can pass to the ChatCompletion model along with the prompt in order to change or affect its output. Thank you.